Okay, I think we're live, and we're gonna see if we can do this before the big game starts. I think the name of that is copyright protected, so I can actually I can actually say it without YouTube striking down this video. But we're gonna do Surah 79. This is the longest remaining surah of the Quran. Like I said, there are about 22 or 24 pages left. And this one is 46 verses, or ayah. And it's entitled Those Who Pull Out. Now, the title here is a reference to angels tearing out the souls of the wicked or putting the souls back into the wicked. And angels are significant, although they don't get a lot of play. They're pretty significant in Islam, and I think Muhammad took the significance from Judaism because angels did play a huge role in the Old Testament. Of course, there was the angel of the Lord, which is many people believe is the pre-incarnate Christ. But there's hi GW. But there are also angels that were angels like the angel Gabriel, uh, the Archangel Michael, who plays an important role in the book of Daniel. And angels led the Jews out of captivity and guided them. So they were important. They were important to the nation of Israel. And I think Muhammad took some of his cues from Judaism and emphasized the importance of angels. So the angels here are ones that tear out the souls of the wicked, and that's why it's called those who pull out. Although it has a slightly different translation in other slightly different title in other translations, but basically angels who are tearing out the souls of wicked people. And angels in the church, what's known as the church age, they don't really play a huge factor. They're people who are saved. They don't. It's not really a function of angels or the work of angels, but angels return at during the tribulation and the second coming. And you see this in the book of Revelation. They have an enormously important role, as they do in Islam. So in verse 1, he says, I swear by the angels who violently pull out the souls of the wicked, and by those who gently draw out the souls of the blessed, and by those who float in space, and then those who are foremost going ahead, then those who regulate the affair. So you see, angels have this enormously important role. They're not only charged with the souls of humans, but also just maintaining what's happening. In contrast to the Bible, where they have a particularly after the resurrection, they have a really ancillary role. Although you do see them, for example, when Paul and Silas are freed from prison, so they do appear. But particularly after resurrection, and especially after the apostolic age ends, you very rarely see angels. John would have been the last one to actually see them, and you see that in the book of Revelation. So in verse 6, it says, "The day on which the quaking one shall quake, what must happen afterwards shall follow it. Hearts on that day shall palpitate, their eyes cast down. They say, shall we indeed be restored to our first state?" And these are people who doubt the resurrection. What when we are rotten bones? They said, then would be a return occasioning loss, but it shall be only a single cry when lo they shall be wakeful. And this is interesting because it kind of has echoes of the book of um, the book of Ezekiel, where he sees the dry bones being gathered, and life being infused into them. And this is a prophetic vision of what's going to happen to the nation of Israel. Um, so it has echoes of that. Um, and this is, of course, this is taking place during the judgment. Um, in 15, the resurrection. And 15 says, "Has not there come to you the story of Musa, i.e., Moses, when his Lord called upon him in the holy valley twice? Go to Pharaoh, surely he has become inordinate. Then say, have you a desire to purify yourself? And I will guide you to your Lord, so that you should fear." So he showed him the mighty sign, but he rejected the truth and disobeyed. Then he went back hastily. Then he gathered men and called out. Then he said, "I am your Lord, the Most High." So Allah seized him with the punishment of the hereafter and the former life. And this is, of course, Muhammad's interpretation of the encounters between Moses and Pharaoh, and Pharaoh's heart hardening and being hardened and resisting. And eventually, of course, what happens is Moses leads the nation of Israel out of captivity through God's divine intervention. But the story of Moses is so so misunderstood in the Quran. And I pointed out just some of the things. The fact that yeah, that's the title of the surah. Those who pull out. Um, the surah was supposedly, this is a Meccan surah, so this was written 5 years before the Hijra, before Muhammad was forced to flee to Medina, and he was given sanctuary by the Jewish tribes there, who he ultimately turned against. But this is, according to Islamic scholars, this is an early or mid Meccan surah, and it lays out Muhammad's eschatology and the eschatology of Islam. But like I said, it's one of the earliest surahs mentioning Moses. So this is one of the first surahs um, that mentions Moses and his encounter with Pharaoh. And if you go through the other surahs, we've already done videos on those, and I've shown you how Muhammad has just a very muddled, confused understanding of this. For example, he has Haman, who was the equivalent of the vizier of the king of Persia, and this is described in the book of Esther. He has Haman as holding an equivalent role under Pharaoh. So he combines and conflates all of these different narratives that took place centuries apart into one narrative in order to bolster his bona fides as far as being a prophet goes. But this is one of the first surahs to mention the Pharaoh. And in 22 it continues, then he went back hastily. 24, I am your Lord the Most High. So Allah seized him with the punishment of the hereafter and the former life. Most surely there is in this a lesson to him who fears. Are you the harder to create, or the heaven? He made it. He raised high its height, then put it into a right good state. And it's funny. This verse almost sounds like it was written by an Englishman to a right good. Cheerio. And he made dark its night and brought out its light. And Muhammad doesn't specify which heaven he's describing here. As you know, Islam has 7 heavens. The first is where Allah resides, and the 7th is where Abraham is. And I described this in the past couple of videos. You see this during the Isra, the night journey of Muhammad. And in 30 it says, and the earth he expanded it after that. He brought forth from it its water and its pasturage, and the mountains he made them firm. And as I said, Muhammad doesn't understand how mountains work. a provision for you and for your cattle. But when the great predominating calamity comes, and that's Judgment Day, the day on which man shall recollect what he strove after, and the hell shall be made manifest to him who sees. Then as for him who is inordinate, again, people who disobey Muhammad, this is what awaits them, and prefers the life of this world, then surely the hell, that is the abode. And as for him who fears to stand in the presence of his Lord and forbids the soul from low desires, then surely the garden, that is the abode. And the irony here is that this is exactly a description of what Muhammad did when he was on earth. The low desires or the carnal desires is something that characterized Muhammad's entire adult life, particularly after he became a figurehead or the leading um, figure for advocating worship of Allah. Also, the fact that um, he mentions hell is the abode of people who disobey him, and as I pointed out, hell is something that even Muslims will experience, and it's something that Muslims fear, and even Muhammad's companions, um, his closest companions, feared hell. Which you would, if you actually interpreted the Quran correctly, you would understand that hell is something that even Muslims will be exposed to. In 42, they ask you about the hour when it will come, about what you are the one to remind of it. To your Lord is the goal of it. You are only a warner to him who would fear it. On the day that they see it, it will be as though they had not tarried but the latter part of a day or the early part of it. And this is a recurring theme in the Quran. People who are expecting or want to bring on judgment, and when it happens, they're condemned. Muhammad is trying to convey the idea that he's simply warning about these things, that he doesn't have any real ability to anticipate them or tell you, but there are hadiths that where Muhammad gives vague intimations of when it's going to happen, but he never actually specifies a date or the time, because he really didn't have any prophetic powers. And it's not just limited to this, the fact that he can't predict the future, the end times, when they're going to culminate. He can't even predict when his other prophecies are going to be fulfilled. So I mean, he's a very it's a very weak prophet. If you compare Muhammad to any of the other prophets described in the Quran, which are taken from the Bible, and you contrast their prophetic track records, you see that Muhammad falls short. And as I said, in the Bible, if you are not 100% correct, you're not a prophet. That's the standard. And Muhammad was incorrect way more than 1% of the time. Yes. Yeah, the night journey is a weird part of the Quran, but it's a critical part of the Quran. In fact, it's used by Muslims to claim that Jerusalem is essential and needs to be de-Judaized. The fact that Jerusalem was part of this, even though if you actually read the description in the Quran, it doesn't specify Jerusalem. Um, the mosque that was built in Jerusalem was built after the Arabic invasions in the 7th century. So there's no way that there could have been a mosque there before Muhammad's death. It's impossible. So there certainly could have been the earliest or one of the earliest mosques that were constructed there. It's not possible unless you believe that Muhammad went back in time and built a mosque that was erased and then reconstructed after the Arabs invaded. Arab Muslim armies invaded. Anyway, that's Surah 79. Like I said, it's the longest remaining surah. There are 34 surahs remaining, and let me see. about 22 pages left, and I think I'm done. So can all go back to watching the Super Bowl. For those of you who don't like football, I guess can find something else to do. But I will see you next time. Thanks, everyone.